You should divorce such a hopeless man. It felt as if she had seen right through my heart. I had been silently enduring my husband Ken's unreasonable behavior because I didn't want our daughter Kelly to be unhappy. I didn't want to put Kelly through the painful experience of her parents getting a divorce while she was still a child. It's okay, Mom. You don't need to endure it for me. What nonsense. Who are you calling trash? I'm not gonna divorce. Kelly, if you have complaints, you might as well drop out of school and leave right now. Kelly glared at Ken. It seemed he didn't like the look in her eyes as he raised his fist to strike Kelly, so I instinctively wrapped her head in my arms. Please stop. I will divorce you. Divorce? You're kidding. Who's gonna do that? Ken, furious, slammed a newspaper against the wall. Kelly and I held each other tight and began to move away from Ken. Divorce isn't something you can just decide on easily. It's not something a kid like you can interfere with. Kelly slowly pushed my arms away and looked at Ken with tears in her eyes and a defiant smile. You really don't know, Dad? My name is Lynn Adrian. I've been working as a nurse and raising Kelly on my own. Ken, my husband, has never helped with childcare or housework, so I pride myself on having raised Kelly alone. Ken is a man of many hobbies, a spendthrift who often splurges on various things. While not a bad person, he lives by the motto that the money he earns is his to spend, using all his income for his own entertainment. Our daily expenses and Kelly's upbringing costs were barely covered by my salary as a nurse, but Ken never seemed to save any money, leading to many frustrating days. Ken has always adored his family home. Even before we got married, he lived at home and never experienced living on his own. Household chores were entirely left to his mother and his sister, Mary. He shamelessly says, "I've never done household chores." His admiration for Mary, who has taken care of him since he was a child, is something special to him. Since our daughter Kelly was born, Ken often used the excuse of Mary wanting to see her niece to frequently visit his family home, always following Mary around with a smile. Towards such a Ken, Mary would say, "What are you, a tail following around?" But she smiled as if she didn't mind it too much. I have no siblings. So, I used to wonder if this is how close siblings are. Even when Kelly became a junior high schooler, the visits to the family home continued weekly. Kelly used to accompany us, but eventually stopped going there to focus on her studies. During a time of uncertainty about her educational path, Kelly suddenly called me and Ken to the living room and presented us with a high school brochure. I immediately realized that the high school, which I had never heard of, was located quite far from where we lived. This high school is too far from home. Choose something closer. I really want to go to this school, please. Ken started flipping through the brochure while stroking his chin. As I looked over it with him, it seemed to be an agricultural specialized school. Agriculture? I never thought she had an interest in farming before. Remember when you spent some time at Grandma's house? Kelly had lived for 6 months in a small house in the countryside where my parents lived when she was in elementary school. During that time, she had stopped attending school. How about changing the environment? At my mother's suggestion, Kelly was sent to stay at my childhood home, surrounded by the countryside and nature. My parents warmly welcomed Kelly, saying, "She's probably just a little tired," and it seems they let her spend peaceful days there. Eventually, when Kelly was about to move up a grade, she decided to come back home on her own, and after that, she was able to attend school like normal. Back then, I helped Grandma with the gardening and sort of got interested in it, Kelly said, scratching the tip of her nose shyly. It's been a while since I've been back home. Even when I think about going back during long weekends, Ken would complain, "It's such a hassle. I don't want to go to your parents' house," and he wouldn't drive. Reluctantly, I always end up following Ken's opinions. By the way, I wonder if the passion flowers at my parents' house are still blooming beautifully. My mom also laughed over the phone, saying, "Well, there's nothing much to do at our house anyway. Our neighborhood has many residential areas and doesn't really feel natural." Just a short walk away, there are major restaurants along the highway, and a large shopping mall is within cycling distance. On clear days, you can't see mountains in the distance, and it's rare to see trees taller than a two-story house. There's a small garden at my parents' house where you can enjoy a variety of flowers throughout the seasons on sunny days, and those days are unforgettable for Kelly. Well, isn't it okay? But out-of-state travels require a parent to accompany you, right? 3 years of high school life. It's impossible for the family to go, isn't it? It'd mean living apart. I know. That's why, Mom, I want you to come with me. Kelly looked at me with a serious and straightforward gaze. I almost had the strange illusion that my daughter was proposing to me, but wait, what about financial issues, living apart? Can Ken really live on his own? Despite my worries, Ken, who seemed not to think too deeply about it, lightly said it should be fine and placed the brochure on the table. It would mean living apart, but is that okay? Can Ken live on his own? That's no problem at all. Well, you're gonna quit your job, right? You'll get a decent amount of severance pay, so we could use that money to fund until graduation. With a nonchalant yet terrible comment, I quietly sighed. 3 years of separation. Does Ken even realize how long that is? Anyway, Kelly finished her high school entrance exams and successfully got into a high school in the countryside. I quit my nursing job and rented a place near her high school so we could live together. Those days were very refreshing and fun. I was always taking care of Ken's needs, but without that, I suddenly had more time on my hands and even started enjoying popular dramas and movies. Half a year into our separation, on a clear day while I was hanging laundry, my phone rang. It was Ken. It's an emergency, come quickly. What? What happened? It's really bad. Something crazy has happened. That's what Ken said in a panicked voice before the call suddenly dropped. I tried calling back immediately, but there was no sign of him picking up, and even my messages weren't read. I quickly informed Kelly to return to Ken's and then hurriedly took a train home. It took an hour and a half by train. After getting off the train, I quickly walked the 15 minutes from the station to our house. As soon as I opened the front door, I frowned at the oddity. What's this smell? The entryway was littered with heaps of garbage bags, cardboard boxes, and scattered cans. As I stood there dumbfounded in the entryway, Mary appeared from the back of the house with a smile and approached me. Oh. Lynn, you came. Mary? You're here? Huh? Didn't Ken tell you? Since he said he couldn't prepare meals or anything, I've been living with him since you moved out. Been living together? As I entered the room, it was a complete mess, looking like the hoarder rooms often featured on TV shows. Ken was eating something in the kitchen and waved at me with a smile, his eyes shining. You came. Today, I really needed you to come. Look at this mess. It looks like it hasn't been cleaned in almost half a year. Right? It's an emergency, isn't it? So, I'm gonna need you to clean up this room. I immediately waved my hands in front of my face to refuse. How could the room get this dirty if Mary has been living here with him? I argued, but Ken just seemed out of it. Huh? What are you useless for? Fine, I'll call a professional cleaning service, so leave some money. What is he even talking about? They don't clean at all. And now they want me to clean it up or give them money because it's so dirty? I felt dizzy. Maybe from the sheer absurdity or maybe because the room was so filthy. But after all, this is my house. With a sense of resignation and disbelief, I began to clean. First, I cleared the used dishes from the dining table and wiped it down. As if they had been waiting for it, Ken and Mary quickly spread out beer and snacks on the clean table and started to party. Look, Ken, let's share the snacks. Thanks, Mary. This is great. What is this? Where did you buy it? Despite being siblings, their behavior was more like that of a couple, which completely dumbfounded me. For months, I continued this routine of coming home every few months to clean up. I kept wondering what I was doing. However, not wanting Kelly to be hurt by her parents' discord, I always approached her with a smile saying, "I'm going to Dad's place to clean up." These days continued for years until one uneventful Sunday afternoon during Kelly's senior year of high school, when I received a call from an unknown number. The call was from the hospital, informing me that my parents had been in an accident. I didn't even have the chance to ask what kind of accident it was or how they were doing before I called a taxi to rush to the hospital. Kelly, who was coming with me, closed her eyes and prayed, holding her knees tightly. It felt like we were in the taxi for a very long time. During the ride, neither Kelly nor I said a word, we just kept staring at the heavy clouds visible through the car window. When we hurriedly arrived at the hospital, Kelly and I were confronted with the shocking truth. My parents had already passed away. I wasn't there for my parents' last moments. In the hospital waiting room, Kelly and I just collapsed into the seats. It felt like the second hand on the wall clock was moving slower than usual, and I stared intently at its dull progress. Ken and Mary arrived later with solemn expressions, but I couldn't help wondering if they were secretly pleased. After all, the reality of my parents' death hadn't sunk in yet, and after the funeral was handled in a detached manner, Ken brought up the topic of inheritance to me. "There's a considerable amount of inheritance coming in, right? What are you gonna do with it?" A few days after the funeral, we were at my childhood home sorting through my parents' belongings. Kelly glanced at me casually when she heard this, then quickly looked away. As I responded vaguely to Ken's question, he appeared slightly restless. He probably assumed that a significant inheritance was due to me, given that my parents were quite wealthy. Suddenly slapping his knee as if he had an idea, Ken cheerfully blurted out to me, "Let's build a new house with the inheritance. From today, you're gonna be like my sister's servant." "Stop it, I'm not in the mood for jokes right now." Ken tilted his head in confusion and grabbed my arm. "It's no joke. Why don't we, you, me, Mary, and Kelly, all live together in a bigger house? We already have a house, there's no need to build another. Besides, why do I have to live with Mary?" I shook off his grip, and Ken frowned in displeasure. Then, the next moment, he twisted the left side of his lips and glared up at me. "Then, can't you give me half of the inheritance?" As I silently glared at Ken, he continued to spout nonsensical things and demanded money from me. He talked about how marital assets should be split equally and how it would be wasteful not to use the inheritance. I felt a slight dizziness and moved closer to the window, feeling the light breeze on my hair as I sighed deeply in my mind. In the house where I spent time with my deceased parents, Ken's face bore an anxious expression, but he managed a stiff smile. Despite being dazzled by the substantial amount of money before us, it seemed like he believed he wouldn't get a penny if he upset me. There was a greedy glint in Ken's eyes. Amidst my confusion and anger, I whispered so quietly that no one could hear, "Let's get a divorce." "Hey, how much exactly is your parents' inheritance? To be honest, I think I should just quit my job, right? Cut it out." Up until now, Kelly had been quietly nearby, but suddenly she yelled and glared at Ken. Ken, not expecting Kelly to shout, stared with his eyes wide open, and after a moment, he burst out laughing. "Oh, I got scared there. What's up? Kelly needs money for college too, right? Huh? You're in your second year of high school now, right? Oh wait, third year? Which is it?" "Mom!" Ignoring Ken's words, whether he was joking or serious, Kelly grabbed my hands as if to encompass them. Enclosed by her almost adult-sized warm hands, I was astonished at how much she had grown. "You should divorce such a hopeless man." It was as if she could see right into my heart. I had been silently enduring Ken's unreasonable behavior all this time because I didn't want to make Kelly unhappy. I didn't want to put Kelly through the painful experience of her parents getting a divorce while she was still a child. "It's okay, Mom. You don't need to endure it for me, all right?" "What nonsense! Who are you calling trash? There's no way I'm gonna divorce. If you have complaints, Kelly, you can just drop out of school and leave right now." Kelly glared at Ken. Apparently disliking the look in her eyes, Ken raised his fist to hit her, so I instinctively wrapped her head in my arms. Please stop. I will divorce you. Divorce? You're kidding. Who's gonna do that? Ken, furious, slammed a newspaper against the wall. Kelly and I held each other tight and began to move away from Ken. Divorce isn't something that can be done just like that. A kid like you has no say in this matter. Kelly slowly pushed my arms away and stepped back, tears glistening in her eyes as she stared defiantly at Ken. You really don't know, Dad? Ken, not understanding what she was referring to, continued to look puzzled as he stared back at her. Even if you don't agree to a divorce, she can still file for divorce in court, and it can be granted, you know? Ken shrugged as if he found it amusing, but Kelly was confident in her assertion. I knew that too, but without Ken having committed domestic violence or infidelity, I wondered if those would be considered valid grounds for a divorce. Ken seemed to think the same, saying, "Look, I haven't cheated or been abusive." Despite not being a typical situation where divorce might be expected, Kelly continued, "Mom can still file for divorce in court, and it can be granted. There's no set period, but generally, if a couple has been living apart for several months to a few years, the relationship can be deemed irreparable, and divorce can be granted." The separation was for you to go to high school. Separation is separation, right? I studied a lot in junior high school, thinking about how I could help you, so. Help me? I was stunned, staring at Kelly's profile. Could it be that Kelly went to a high school far away to distance me from Ken? I've always hated Dad. I can't forget how indifferent he seemed when I struggled with not being able to go to school when I was in elementary school. Ken ran his hands through his hair, mumbling something about bringing up such old issues now. Indeed, Ken had shown no concern or advice during Kelly's truancy days, preferring to go out drinking with colleagues or having fun. Furthermore, since Kelly was born, he had hardly ever acted like a father, seeming more like a child who had grown up without changing. I found myself unable to recall what I ever liked about him. Yet, I always hoped that someday Dad would change. I believed that someday he'd be kind to Mom and do fatherly things for me. Come on, we were just discussing how to use the inheritance. Am I really that bad? Ken suddenly seemed downtrodden. Ken doesn't understand. He doesn't realize how insensitive his actions and words have been. I shouldn't stay with someone like him. Until now, I had pretended not to care, just because he was Kelly's father, but maybe that was my own negligence. If I don't show my determination here and now, I might waste the opportunity that Kelly has created for us. As Ken approaches me with a half smile, saying, "All right, I was wrong. I'll be more careful from now on," and tries to touch my hand, I quickly step away. Stop, don't touch me. If you won't agree to the divorce, then we'll settle this in court. Come on, are you serious? We are responsible for our own happiness. I vow in my heart to forge a path to happiness and protect my daughter's future as a mother. As my resolve ignites, the doorbell at my parents' house rings unexpectedly. Who could it be? As Kelly and I exchange glances, we hear Mary's cheerful voice, "Sorry to bother you." This visit seems to have been unexpected for Ken too. What? He looks surprised. Seconds after the doorbell rings, Mary enters pulling a large suitcase behind her into the living room where we are. Wow, what's going on here? Anything interesting? Kelly and I freeze, both making a "what do you" face. Oblivious to our dismay, Mary starts looking around the living room, rummaging through drawers as if on a treasure hunt. It's fun, like a treasure search. It's been a while since you've been back home, right, Lynn? You probably don't know where the jewelry is kept. Maybe there's even some cash stashed in the dresser. It feels like a burglary is happening right in front of me, and a strong sense of discomfort becomes evident. I grab Mary's hand and quietly say, "Please leave." No way, no way. It's not good to keep it all to yourself, Lynn. You are Ken's wife. That means half of your inheritance is Ken's. I'm preparing to divorce Ken. From now on, you are a stranger to us. Please leave the house. Mary looks at me, slightly surprised, then turns to look at Ken. Ken, can you drive me home? Let's go home. Oh, yeah. Ken quickly started getting ready to leave, hurrying out of the house as if chasing after Mary. The large suitcase seemed to have been empty from the start, as he lifted it effortlessly to the front door. What was Mary thinking of stuffing into that large suitcase? As we were leaving, Mary turned around and flashed a full smile at me. Even if you do divorce, Lynn, you've come into a lot of inheritance. If it goes to court, half of it will forcibly become Ken's, right? I felt the blood drain from my body at her words. If I file for divorce now, my parents' inheritance would be split with Ken. If only I had decided to divorce sooner. If only my parents hadn't died in an accident at the same time. Mary and Ken smiling at me was frustrating, and Kelly gently enveloped my tightly clenched fist again. Kelly's calm expression reminded me a little of my mother, her grandmother. It's okay. The assets divided in a divorce are only those acquired during the marriage. Smart, aren't you? Too bad for you, Lynn, getting the inheritance before you divorced. This kind of inheritance isn't considered shared property. The inheritance Mom got from Grandma isn't shared, it's hers alone. Mary seemed not to understand the conversation, staring off at the ceiling. Don't worry, the inheritance won't be split in half in the divorce. This time, it was Mary who looked pale, shaking Ken's shoulder. It seems she had heard from Ken about my substantial inheritance, and had already made various plans depending on that money. Looking closer, she was holding expensive-looking clothes and bags. Hey, Ken! What about next month's credit card payment? I don't know what you expect me to do about that. As I left my family home, the siblings continued to argue amiably. I took one last look around the surroundings of my family home. I immediately scheduled a meeting with a lawyer and began preparing for the divorce lawsuit. At the same time, I shared my decision to divorce with a friend. A friend from my student days encouraged me, while others chuckled and said, "About time." When someone asked why I ever married such a man, I was overwhelmed by indescribable emotions. Infidelity or violence, it's certainly easier to understand when those are reasons for divorce. Yeah. Dad never really did anything fatherly. I can't forgive that, I really can't. Kelly, who had never regarded Ken as a father due to his lack of involvement in parenting, seems to have been researching divorce through the internet and books from a young age. It appears she was preparing to be helpful in case I ever decided to choose divorce. Several months passed, and Ken and I were officially divorced with the court's intervention. The only asset we had between us was our home, but I decided to relinquish it. Instead, I asked Ken to prepare half of the home's asset value in cash, but he flatly refused. Legally, such demands were not feasible, so the house was put up for sale, and the proceeds were to be split. This had been discussed and initially agreed upon in family court, even by Mary, but when the day came to vacate, both remained in the home. Despite multiple warnings, they forcibly continued to live in the house now on sale, which eventually led to police involvement and Ken losing his job due to his conduct. Eventually, Mary and Ken returned to their original home. Their unhygienic and unhealthy lifestyle continued, and now they live quietly without much contact with neighbors, looking rather unkempt and run down. Meanwhile, Kelly graduated from the high school. After graduation, she secured a job as a local government worker in the agricultural department, using her knowledge of agriculture, which made her very happy. Simultaneously, I also entered the workforce as a caretaker. Although the inheritance brought some financial relief, I still felt a desire to be useful and believed I could still work. The house where I grew up was sold, including the land, and is now inhabited by a young couple who are ceramic artists. Kelly and I purchased a condo where we live together happily. "Hey, Mom," Kelly said as we stood on the balcony of our condo, looking at the mountains visible beyond the clouds. She leaned on her elbow next to me. "Remember when I couldn't go to school? Grandma was really kind to me then. She never brought up school, and we never even talked about what day of the week it was. It was as if time stood still. We didn't even turn on the TV. There's a planter on the balcony with passion flowers that my parents particularly cherished. I brought them from my family home before it was sold. The purple petals and their subtle fragrance always bring a slight softness to my heart. Someday, I want to create a place where kids who can't go to school, like I couldn't, can forget about tomorrow and just enjoy the present. Kelly. Someday, I hope to become as kind as Grandma. Kelly said to me before heading back into the room. The troubles with Ken and Mary feel like they're fading into the distant past, a mere memory. There's no longer any trace of the little girl Kelly once was. She's growing into a composed adult woman. Suddenly, I remembered my own parents and, for the first time since they passed away, I cried. From today on, I'll be taking care of this little one. Thanks for everything up until now. My mother-in-law exclaimed this to me with a warm smile on her face. Out of the blue, she came over to our house, grinning as she hugged my daughter, Emily. Emily looked dumbfounded at first, but as she began to comprehend her grandmother's words, she tried to wriggle out of her embrace. After holding Emily tight, my mother-in-law flashed another bright smile and said, "You should just leave now. My name is Susan. I work in an office building in the city. I'm a working mom. The building I work in isn't huge, but it's bustling because it houses more than just our company. I always find myself chatting with women of my age group, so I have many friends in the building. I've been recognized for my work in the accounting department and lead a fulfilling life. When I get home, my husband Paul and our 11-year-old daughter Emily are there. Paul and I manage our busy schedules, sharing household chores and childcare responsibilities. He genuinely cherishes both Emily and me. However, our blissful days started to change little by little. Paul tends to impose his own likes and interests on Emily. At first, it was soccer. It's one thing if Emily wants to play, but it felt forceful when he'd only let her play soccer even though she'd rather play in the sandbox. Yet, as she grew older, Emily became a soccer-loving girl who could stand toe-to-toe with her male classmates. Of course, she dreams of making her mark as a female soccer player in the future. I've become one of her biggest fans. But, Paul's enthusiasm seemed to last only in the early days. Lately, he's all about swimming. Girls should definitely try swimming. Maybe synchronized swimming could be good? When Paul brought it up during dinner, Emily made a face, clearly perplexed. But Dad, I love soccer. I find it more fun than swimming and I want to do it even more. Soccer is cool, sure, but why would you, a girl, want to play a sport typically considered for boys? A palpable tension runs between the two of them. At times like these, I always struggle with when I should intervene. Emily has her own thoughts, so I'm torn whether it's right to interrupt and end the conversation. Emily talks back to her father. Gender doesn't matter. Right now, soccer is fun and pursuing it is my dream. You've been playing soccer so much, you've gotten quite toned. You're tanned and look like a boy. Don't women need to be slim to be attractive? If you were swimming, you wouldn't have to worry about tanning. You! Emily is taken aback by his condescending remarks. I immediately scold my husband. How could you say that to our daughter? Her physique is proof of the hard training she's been doing. Just because she's our only daughter. Even though she's training so hard, she's still a girl. What's gonna happen if she ends up being a muscular woman with a small chest? Isn't that sad? Why can you say such horrible things? Shocked, Emily falls silent. I yelled at my husband even louder than before, but he doesn't seem to realize he's being insensitive about female soccer players. Sure, the teams are co-ed now, but her competition is mostly men. Emily has her limits being a girl. There aren't any female-only soccer teams around here, so maybe it's time to consider something else. I'm not saying she should go pro in swimming. Isn't it normal for girls to have swimming lessons? Enough! Emily storms out, knocking her chair back and running to her room. In disbelief, I turn to my husband who angrily says, "We were in the middle of a conversation. That wasn't a discussion." It was just him imposing his views, completely disregarding Emily's dignity and dreams. Later, when he wasn't around, I checked on her and as expected, she told me with tearful eyes that she didn't want to talk to her father. The next morning, I suggested she either leave for school at a different time to avoid Paul or if it's too tough, she can take the day off. I did my best to console her. From then on, every time Paul brought up swimming, Emily ignored him. She thinks she's so special, ignoring me just because she's a girl. Even if she's going through her teenage years, it's a bit much. My daughter just keeps shutting herself off from her father, who won't listen to her words. I strongly felt that we had to change this situation, so I told my husband multiple times. The one who's going overboard is you. Why do you only push your own interests onto our daughter? Why do you need to badmouth soccer when you talk about the greatness of swimming? You're the one trying to rain on something she's passionate about. Please, just respect her feelings and thoughts. But it seems like nothing's getting through to him. Instead, he snaps at me. Now you're gonna tell me what to do? Who do you think is taking care of our daughter? Just because you're my wife doesn't mean you can boss me around. Tell her clearly to quit soccer. My husband's habit of ordering me and our daughter around and saying things like just because you're a woman or just because you're my wife as if our gender gives him the right, stems from a specific reason. It's a boss of his. We also know him privately, and he's a very close friend. He has been to our house and, apparently, he had a lot to say behind our backs when he found out we both work. This boss seems friendly and easygoing on the surface, and my husband enjoyed his company because of his personality. However, as time went on, the boss's distorted views towards women became more apparent. He started to emphasize the differences between men and women, making more remarks that belittle women's capabilities. At first, my husband would just laugh it off, but gradually those words started to stick. The boss's belief that women have a domestic role, and it's greedy for them to work, started casting a shadow on my husband's heart. This shift in my husband's attitude created a huge rift in our relationship. Initially, he was pressuring me, who works outside the home, to quit my job and stay home. But he realized that with his income alone, it would be hard to maintain our current lifestyle. So, he stopped pushing me outright to quit, but he keeps on preaching about the greatness of being a stay-at-home mom. Yet, that wasn't enough. And eventually, his frustration turned towards our daughter. He probably sympathizes with his boss because he imposes his own tastes and beliefs. He doesn't think about Emily's opinions or her future at all. He just thinks that since Emily is a woman, it's natural for her to obey his commands. The only way to mend this strained relationship is to change him. But no matter what we say or how, nothing seems to get through to him. On top of that, all we get is an outdated response. Who does she think she is, a woman, challenging me? I was distressed, but I couldn't let Emily suffer any longer. I finally brought up the idea of divorce to Paul. I want to distance myself from you, for Emily's future, I said. But he was vehemently against it. This is why women are so foolish. If you really had Emily's future in mind, you'd know it's a bad idea to divorce a breadwinner like me. With rising college expenses, do you really think you can support her all by yourself? You're just too dumb. I'll guide you properly, so just shut up and follow. He said this with an angry expression. His words were filled with confidence, as if he believed he was completely in the right. I've reached my limit. Taking a deep breath, I faced him. Yes, our income will decrease and preparing for college will be hard. But above all, I can't leave Emily by your side any longer. You don't think about her future at all. You just want to control her, don't you? This is the prime time of her life, and it's unfair for her to be dominated by her father. That's why I think we should part ways. I don't expect Emily to become a professional athlete, nor do I think she absolutely can't make it. I just want to support my daughter in pursuing what she loves. And you, who disrespect our daughter's dignity, are nothing but harmful. I believe it's my duty to provide an environment where Emily can safely explore her potential. Don't just casually bring up divorce. If you want to leave, then just go on your own. You're telling me to leave? When did I say that? And how do you plan to live with Emily if I do? Gonna call your mom? Paul crossed his arms, remaining stubborn. But when I stood my ground, his expression quickly turned smug. It's your fault for mentioning divorce. I should just call my mom now and let her discipline you. Paul acted immediately. He called his mother, who lives nearby. Hello, Mom? Look, I'm in a bit of a bind. Susan suddenly mentioned getting a divorce. I'm just as shocked. I hate to ask, but can you come over and set her straight? You're a woman, too. Dad must have set you straight before, right? So, you can do the same for Susan? He said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Most of what he said was blaming me for being selfish. It's quite sickening to hear him talk to his mother in that way. Regardless, my mother-in-law replied, I'm on my way. And it turned out we'd be discussing the divorce. Is Grandma coming? However, since we were discussing this in the living room, Emily came out of her room. We didn't want her to hear us talk about the divorce, so we had told her to stay in her room. She must have sensed something was amiss. Soon, my mother-in-law arrived, and as she caught sight of Emily, she rushed over, pushing past us to hug the little girl tightly. Then she turned to Paul and me with an angry look. I've heard everything, Emily, you've been through a lot. Paul smirked, thinking he had the upper hand, and glanced at me smugly. From now on, I'll take care of Emily. Susan, you can't take it anymore, can you? Just pack up your things and be out by tonight. Upon hearing this, Paul burst out laughing. Pointing at me, he said, See, even Mom agrees. If you apologize now, I might forgive you. How dare you, a wife, defy your husband like that? Say you're sorry. At this, Emily jumped out of her grandmother's embrace. She ran past the adults and into her room. My mother-in-law tried to follow, but the door opened immediately. There stood Emily, with a backpack on, a glossy sports bag slung over her shoulder, and even a cute little green carry-on suitcase in tow. She approached me with a smile. I'm ready to go. Grandma can take care of the rest. I don't want a creepy dad like him. She then took my hand. Her sunburned skin made her seem more robust, just like Paul had mentioned. Yet, feeling the warmth of her still tender hand, I nearly shed a tear. Let's get going, Mom. The one who was shocked was Paul. I had mentioned leaving, but he probably hadn't anticipated Emily wanting to come with me. Moreover, he was surprised at the bags packed to the brim and how well prepared everything seemed. What are you talking about? Emily, you can stay in this house. What we don't need is a nagging mother, right? I'm gonna kick out her and Grandma will come in your place. I'm gonna take you to swimming lessons next time, so calm down, all right? The husband, even at this point, kept making selfish remarks. However, it seemed the daughter had decided to ignore Paul, turning her back on him completely. Suddenly, the mother-in-law interjected with a puzzled look. Swimming lessons? Not soccer? Before I could say anything, the daughter spoke up. Dad doesn't like seeing my training and getting a muscular body. He thinks I should get a nice figure, wear cute swimsuits, and have lots of pictures taken. He says girls feel happier when they're popular with boys. Creepy, right? Hearing this from the daughter, both the mother-in-law and I were in shock. The mother-in-law raised her voice. Paul! What on earth are you telling our daughter? You're not looking at her in that way, are you? Paul flinched and looked around nervously. It was clear that, even in situations like this, Paul was always on thin ice with his mother. It's a misunderstanding. But come on, no one wants a girl who looks like a man, right? It's definitely better if she focuses on her looks, dresses to impress guys, and uses makeup. In the end, she's gonna support her husband at home, right? Paul tried to defend himself. My mother-in-law sighed. What would your late father say if he heard this? Thinking my mother-in-law was on his side, Paul looked even more flustered. But it wasn't surprising. Almost all of Paul's derogatory comments about women, and the way he treated me and Emily, had been reported to his mother. But I had hesitated to tell her about his criticisms of Emily's physique. It would have been too painful for any mother to hear. Paul had long since lost his filter. He always spoke disrespectfully about women, even to his mother, and no amount of scolding had any effect. My mother-in-law, unlike Paul, was a strong, dependable person. Eventually, after several consultations, we divorced, and a plan was set for my mother-in-law to re-educate Paul. "I'm sorry, Emily, Susan. I'll take responsibility for raising this boy," the mother-in-law said, clearly referring to her son, Paul. Thus, in a role reversal, Emily and I temporarily moved into his mother's house. True to her word, she moved into our home and began Paul's re-education. The divorce was finalized, and we were supposed to go back to our normal lives. Finding a new place and dividing assets might take time, but living as a married couple was out of the question. As soon as Emily put down her backpack at her grandmother's house, she burst into tears. I hugged her, feeling more than ever that I never wanted to see Paul again. Just a week later, while I was at work, I had an unexpected visitor. The visitor's name was Mr. Smith, a name that sounded familiar to me. When I confirmed his full name, it was unmistakably that of my husband's boss. The very man who had influenced Paul so much. I was shocked and wondered why such a person would come to my workplace, yet I headed to the lounge booth within the office building. We have limited space for guests at our company, and it was currently being used for meetings with other clients. When we run out, we often borrow common areas within the building. For major negotiations, we might rent out a separate meeting room. Most of our walk-in visitors are salespeople, so I asked him to wait in the lounge. But it wasn't just Mr. Smith there. Paul was there too. Apparently, they had both taken a detour from their field sales to visit me. "We can't talk properly at home with my mother around. Figured you'd take us seriously at work," Paul said. It seemed my husband, knowing I had his mother on my side, brought his idolized boss. What he wanted to say was the same old line. "You need to settle down and listen to me. Heads of households should have the final say, you know. Women are just an accessory to men. Dressing up nicely is a given. Thinking they can compete with men in sports or anything is presumptuous. Man, I'm far from perfect. Can't discipline my unruly wife or daughter. Mr. Smith, I really need your help." Looking at my husband laughing and acting smug, I was getting a headache. To make matters worse, he said he would never approve of Emily's soccer and assumed I might as well quit my not-so-important job. The issue was Mr. Smith, sitting next to him, grinning at my discomfort, backing up every word Paul said. There wasn't Paul's mother here to take my side. I was being interrupted at work and, grappling with how to handle them, their harsh words paralyzed me. I was holding back from snapping at them, fearing things might escalate to violence. I could feel my eyes burning with tears. I was just grateful Emily wasn't here to see this. I wouldn't want her to see her father with such a scornful expression. I was contemplating leaving without a word, when someone spoke to us. "Isn't that Mr. Smith from AB Company's sales department? What are you guys up to?" Both men turned around and, in unison, quickly stood up. An older gentleman was standing there. He was well-dressed and clearly held a position of authority. Beside him was a woman, perhaps his aide or secretary. From the disdainful look she gave Paul and Mr. Smith, it was clear she had heard their conversation. "Mr. Miller, what brings you here?" "My office is on the 3rd floor. You guys usually visit the branch office's conference room for sales. I guess you might not be interested in knowing this, but it might be useful for you to remember whether you're visiting the branch or the headquarters." At the sound and content of the man's chilling voice, Paul and Mr. Smith were left speechless, their faces pale as ghosts. The man was a business owner on the 3rd floor of the office building. If he didn't have meetings or appointments, he'd be over here, and I've seen him a few times before. The CEO remembered me and had been secretly listening to the intense conversation between us in the lounge. It wasn't until his secretary mentioned it that he realized Mr. Smith was a sales rep from one of their partners. Heard she's your wife, huh? To act that way towards a woman and kids. Was that young sales guy with you, Mr. Smith? Hand over your business card now. The CEO then collected business cards from both of them, casting a disdainful look at the trembling pair. After all, they had been working in a conference room so grand one could mistake it for the CEO's office of a headquarters. I found out later that Paul's company had stirred up a massive commotion, like poking a hornet's nest. We'll have to reconsider our partnership with you. Please, I beg of you. I was just disciplining my not-so-competent wife. We won't cause any trouble for your company. Forgot that most of our consumers are homemakers raising kids? Even if it's someone outside the company, being associated with someone of such beliefs would hurt our image. Just get out of here. Paying no attention to me, my ex-husband and his boss kept apologizing. But even their desperate pleas reeked of misogyny, and the CEO remained stern. I wasn't in a position to defend them, so I just watched. Perhaps due to the commotion, various office workers were giving the two cold stares. Eventually, the two were chased out of the building like flies. Later on, the CEO did reduce and eventually cut off all business dealings with my ex-husband's company. Rumors also spread about their behavior, causing many clients to back out, and the company removed the two from their sales positions. They lost trust from clients and within their company, ending up in positions where they were given no significant tasks. As for me, since that incident, the CEO has personally introduced me to some top-notch divorce attorneys, and we've kept in touch. I was advancing with custody investigations with his support. Juggling work, matters concerning Emily, and the all procedures were tough, but with legal support, I was able to handle things more calmly. However, one day, my ex-husband and Mr. Smith showed up at my workplace again. Please get Mr. Miller for me, help me out. They pleaded loudly. I didn't feel as intimidated by them as I used to. It wasn't that they had changed, but rather that I had grown capable of taking their words calmly. Whispers and murmurs of surprise emanated from my colleagues towards the two who waited outside. This is gonna cause problems for other companies too. Eventually, I had no choice but to call the police. When they arrived, my ex-husband, Paul, got aggressive and was taken away. Thankfully, no one got hurt, and while he wasn't arrested, the ostracization within the company intensified. Paul, once seen as a potential star in sales alongside Mr. Smith, couldn't bear the shame and chose to resign early. As for Smith, his attitude didn't change. In fact, his behavior worsened due to his dissatisfaction with how he was treated. He brazenly started to slack off at work, arguing it was the company's fault for not giving him work. Furthermore, his aggressive behavior and misogynistic comments increased, and it seems he eventually faced a lawsuit from female colleagues. Later on, through the grapevine, I heard Mr. Smith sought legal help. However, when a female attorney listened to his story, he spewed outrageous comments like, "Get me a male attorney." Or, "How can a woman be an attorney? How much did you pay? Maybe you're paying with your body?" Leading him to be banned from that law firm. I was transferred to a new branch of my company. Given that my ex-husband knew my whereabouts and being a single mother had its challenges, I was moved to a department that prioritized a more child-friendly work environment. I couldn't move too far because of Emily's school and soccer team. I didn't want to change her environment entirely. Fortunately, the new location was just a few subway stops away, so as long as I was careful, I wouldn't run into Paul. Working in this new environment was quite stimulating for me. I could ensure time at home to chat with Emily, feeling fulfilled in both my work and personal life. Emily still passionately played soccer every day. I'm so happy to fully support her dreams. I decided to occasionally meet with Paul's mother. We'd make a bit of a trip to enjoy a cup of coffee at a fancy cafe and chat. Emily seems to be back in good spirits, doesn't she? Yes, she really is. She adapted to the new environment quickly. Leaving home seems to have been good for her. I should have made that decision sooner. When I smiled and nodded, my mother-in-law took a moment and then talked to me about my ex-husband Paul's behavior. Paul had quit his job and apparently stayed home for a while, deeply depressed. During that time, Mr. Smith faced lawsuits from female colleagues at the company, and naturally they lost touch. He probably had other things on his mind. It seems that since putting some physical distance from Mr. Smith, Paul's perspective has been gradually changing. I was told that he's breaking away from the influence of Mr. Smith and slowly going back to how he used to be. I quietly breathed a sigh of relief. While it seems we still need my mother-in-law to keep an eye on him for a bit, I do prefer the kinder Paul the first once knew. It's uncertain when he might relapse, so I haven't let him see our daughter, Emily. Any exchanges are done through lawyers or Paul's mother, avoiding direct contact. I won't ever say you should remarry him. If he's truly remorseful, he'd feel too guilty to even ask for it. You've got Emily to consider too, you both should prioritize your own happiness. Paul's mother concluded with that. I had always known she was dependable, but with this matter, I realized how invaluable she really is. Regardless of my history with Paul, I want to have a good relationship with her as an individual. When I expressed this, she got teary-eyed but agreed shyly. We're planning to watch a soccer game together. Emily has been selected as a regular player among the seniors, so we're gonna cheer her on with all we've got. I'm gonna take your baby and leave it in the mountains. I'm nursing my son right here, okay? Upon hearing my words, a sound of a smartphone dropping came from the other end of the phone line. It was Lisa, my sister-in-law. She must have checked the back seat, for a scream followed shortly after. Come to think of it, Lisa had always been tormenting me. Indeed, there were the scenes at the wedding reception, the constant spam emails, and the sudden visit right before I gave birth. But that scream marked the beginning of Lisa's end. My name is Michelle Anderson. I'm 27 and just recently gave birth and returned from the hospital. My husband, Michael, is completely smitten with our newborn son, Alex, and he reluctantly went to work today. I get along well with my in-laws and you could say we're living a happy married life. Except for Lisa, of course. From the very beginning, Lisa and I didn't gel well. Michael and I were classmates in middle school. Our school in a small town in Nebraska was peaceful with fewer students and an atmosphere where bullying was unheard of. Michael's family runs a decent-sized construction company in the area. Mostly working within the state but occasionally getting orders from outside. It's well regarded. Their house was large and our group of friends would often hang out or study there. Michael's mom was always welcoming. They had a part-time helper who kept the house tidy, and during her breaks, she'd serve us snacks and drinks. One summer day, while working on homework, we heard unfamiliar, heavy footsteps. Wondering who it could be, we were soon hit with an overpowering scent of perfume. "Mikey, I'm back!" A flamboyant, large woman called his name and literally jumped on him. He pushed her away, exclaiming, "Sis, we're studying here, okay? Oh come on, Mikey. It's not nice to treat your sister like that after such a long time." She pouted. "I told you, we're studying. We have exams coming up." Yeah, whatever." She then scanned our group, pausing to look at each one of us. While she was doing that, he went to call his mom. She seemed to be sizing each of us up. When her gaze met mine, she frowned deeply. Ew, why is she here? No one really understood what she meant. She gestured towards some of the others and said, "You're okay, and so are you. But you." She pointed at me. "Don't get close to my Mikey. You seem so dull and gloomy." I was stunned, never having been spoken to like that before. My friends quickly jumped to my defense, saying things like, "She always helps us with homework." Or, "She's really smart." What's that got to do with anything? Being around her might make Mikey gloomy too. She waved her hands dismissively at me. She was wearing a dress with too many frills and ribbons for a summer day. And she was quite imposing, especially compared to us middle schoolers. I'm leaving. I didn't listen to my friend's pleas to stay and hurriedly left, hearing Lisa's amused laughter behind me. That day, I got an apology call from Michael. I'm sorry for what Lisa did. She's always been like that, ever since we were kids. Oh, really? I don't know why she said those things to you. It's okay. It's not your fault, Michael. But since that incident, every time someone mentioned going to his house, I hesitated. Time flew, we graduated, and went to different high schools. Our group drifted apart, and I lost touch with Michael. I bumped into him again when I moved to New York for college. After the orientation, as I was wandering through clubs trying to decide which to join, someone suddenly grabbed my arm. Is that you, Michelle? Michael? Is that you? It seemed too good to be true, but Michael was attending the same college and was in the same department as me. We had different majors, but we ended up taking many of the same classes. We started hanging out a lot. Those 4 years deepened our bond. Then came job hunting. Neither of us ended up going back to our hometowns. Michael was expected to take over his family's business, so I was surprised when I heard he wasn't returning. Then he told me, "You know, I never told you this, but I ran away from Lisa." I was shocked to hear this from him, who was looking so serious. What do you mean? When I started high school, Lisa got a job at a local company through my dad's connections. She had always wanted to stay in New York and have fun, but she couldn't find a job anywhere else. Remembering the loud and overpowering presence of Lisa, I thought. So that's what happened. That's why I wanted to find a job and get married here. Is that okay with you? What do you mean by okay? You're the only one I want to be with. I couldn't help but hug Michael tightly. 3 years later, he proposed, and we decided to get married. When we went to his family home to introduce ourselves, Lisa was waiting for us. She looked at me and said, "What are you doing here? You're that girl from back then? I thought I'd never see you again after I threatened you that day." I remember being oddly calm and surprised she remembered that after 10 years. Then, at our wedding, Lisa caused a scene. Why can't I wear the dress I like? She had arrived in a huge, fluffy white dress. That made her look like a snowman. She arrived at the last moment. So we knew she did it on purpose. There was no time to change her outfit, and she wouldn't have fit into a backup dress anyway. She had always been on the larger side, and she seemed even bigger now. Then, at the reception, she really made a scene. After drinking way too much, she stumbled up during Michael's boss's speech, saying, "You don't have to hide that thin hair of yours," and laughingly took off his wig. I'll never forget the look on Michael's face. Everyone knows not to mention things like that, especially in public. Michael immediately ran over and apologized profusely. Our in-laws quickly grabbed Lisa from both sides and took her out. After the reception, we demanded an apology from Lisa. But she just sat there, crossed her legs, turned her head away, and said, "I will never accept your marriage. Why on earth is Michael with someone like you? Enough is enough, Lisa. You always mess with my friends and partners. Do you know why I left our hometown? It was because of you. Mikey." Lisa turned to look at Michael for the first time. "Ew, why the scary look? Oh right, it must be because of her. Of course. Ew, she's just the type to sit in the corner of the classroom and quietly read books. She must have been talking behind my back to Mikey. I'm sure of it. It was my decision not to introduce you to Michelle for so long. Everything falls apart when you're around. The reason I didn't make the varsity baseball team in high school was my own lack of skill. Yet you still went to confront the coach, and after that, I couldn't stay in the team. You remember that, don't you? But that's not true. It's awful that the coach doesn't recognize Mikey's talents. You are meant to shine. I've always supported you that way." My father-in-law sighed as he looked at Lisa, who was shouting hysterically. However, after a while, he got up, grabbed her hand and said, "Lisa, get ready quickly. We're giving up the room you're living in now." "What are you talking about?" "Just now, there was a call from your company. That person has been an important contact of yours, having been associated with your company's deputy director for a long time." "What?" Lisa's astonished voice echoed throughout the room. "So, you were rude to him. You know what that means, right?" He was quite angry, but he said he'll continue doing business with the company in exchange for firing you. I let you live on your own because you said you're working, but that's over. We won't let you out of the house so easily. And we're gonna put you to work hard here." My father-in-law's stern voice was a relief to Michelle and Michael. "You too, live your life without any worries. Don't worry about the company. Even if you're going to take over, it's still a long way off." Their parents' words were reassuring. However, that was not the end of it. Every day, my phone received harassing calls and a barrage of emails. When I checked her messages during my break at work, I saw a list of comments like, "Because of you, Mikey doesn't come back to his hometown. Mikey is mine. He should always be at home with me. You're not fit to be Mikey's wife. Persuade Mikey to come back." I was seriously considering blocking her number. But then I was overwhelmed by the fear that she might just show up at my door if I did. Around that time, I often felt sick. So, I just let the calls go to voicemail and ignored the texts. Then, I found out I was pregnant. With the persistent nausea, it made sense. When I informed both my parents and Michael's parents, both families immediately congratulated us. "So, where's Lisa?" "She's out right now. Don't worry, I plan on keeping it from her as long as possible." Over the phone, I could hear the weariness in Michael's mother's voice. "Thank you. How is Lisa doing there?" "Well, she's still not back. Every day after work, she's out somewhere in her car." "How's the work at your husband's company?" Michael's mother sighed deeply. "It's a mess. Lisa doesn't even try to learn the basics of her job, and it seems she can't." I was shocked to hear that. "And lately, she keeps saying this, that she was deeply hurt by what was said back then. She became depressed and doesn't want to go to work. Even when I tell her to see a doctor and get a note, she says she's too depressed to move. Although I send her off, I've heard she often skips work without notice." "But she drives around a lot, right?" "Yes. She's unpredictable, but I'll make sure she doesn't come bothering you during your crucial time." Thanks to Michael's mother, I didn't face any surprise visits from Lisa while I was home. However, I continued to receive a barrage of emails from her. "When are you gonna divorce? You should leave. You're just holding Mikey back. This child looks just like Mikey's first love, completely different from you. Looks like me, actually." The messages were repetitive and draining. I had another issue too. The morning sickness hit me early and hard. Michael was concerned and suggested I take an early leave from work and return to my parents' house. "But isn't my parents' place in the same school district as yours? I fear Lisa might show up any day." Michael pondered over this and then called his father. He replied, "All right, since Lisa can't seem to hold a job anyways, I'll force her to join me on a long-term project." "Is it far this time?" "It's nearby, but on an island. So, she can't return without my permission." It was reassuring to hear that. I expressed my gratitude to Michael's parents and decided to return to my parents' house. Upon visiting Michael's family home, both my father-in-law and Lisa were out, making the large house seem lonely. "It's okay. We're relieved without her around." It seemed they were tired of their daily life with Lisa. However, close to my delivery date, a shocking event took place. "Michelle! Why are you here?" Lisa was banging loudly on my parents' door. At that time, my mother had gone out shopping. I checked all the windows to make sure they were locked. Everything was sealed tight. As long as I didn't go out, I'd be fine. But then, there was a loud crashing noise. Through the living room curtains, I could see a figure. It was Lisa. She was holding a metal baseball bat and stomped her way into the house, shoes on. "There you are! I knew you were home, Michelle." I grabbed my phone and made my way to the front door. Lisa seemed to have predicted my move as she quickly closed in on me. I knew I was in danger and tried to rush upstairs. But at that moment, I felt a terrible blow to my back. Lisa had struck me right in the middle of my back with the baseball bat she held. Ouch! But I couldn't just stand there. I choked on the impact, feeling a rising sensation from my stomach, almost like nausea. Still clutching my belly, I began to climb the familiar stairs, trying to move as swiftly as I could. "Wait up!" Lisa shouted at the top of her lungs. No way I was waiting. My destination was the room on the second floor I'd used before going to college. I've been living on the first floor since I came back home, so I don't usually use it. But in there, I can lock the door from the inside. Lisa, groaning, followed with heavy steps, laboriously making her way up our winding staircase. She paused midway, catching her breath. I took this chance and darted into my room. I locked the door and dragged a table in front of it for extra security. Relief flooded me, and I slumped to the floor. That's when I noticed the carpet was damp. My water broke! I realized this and felt my body shivering uncontrollably. Oh no, not now. On the other side of the door, Lisa had caught up. She was pounding on the door with the bat. Each thud was heavy, a testament to her strength, and random thoughts raced through my head. Then, "Hey! What the hell?" I heard my mom's voice from outside the window. She's back, I thought, relieved. But I couldn't let her in. It's too dangerous. I called my mom on my cell. "Michelle! Are you okay? This shattered window!" "Mom. Call 911. Get an ambulance and the police." "You mean the police, but an ambulance? Don't tell me." "Yes, that's right, my water broke. But I'm trapped upstairs. Hurry, but don't let Lisa see you. She's got a bat." I managed to say this before I fainted from the stress. When I came to, everything seemed to be over. I felt strange and my head was foggy. "Michelle, thank God you're awake." A familiar voice. Michael was by my bed. What happened? Then it hit me. My stomach. "Michelle, when they brought you in, things were looking dire. They had to perform an emergency C-section." "My baby? Where's my baby?" "He's fine. A healthy baby boy. Thank you. We'll go see him together later." I took a deep breath of relief. And... Ouch! "You can't do that. The doctor said you have a pretty bad fracture." I shivered. Was it when Lisa hit me? Did the bat strike my ribs? Thank God it wasn't the baby. I truly felt that from the bottom of my heart. Michael then apologized. "I'm sorry." "Huh? Why are you apologizing?" "That baseball bat Lisa brought over was in my room." Oh, I remembered. It was the bat Michael had once used for the baseball team he had to quit midway. "I shouldn't have left it where she could find it." "It's not your fault. If she hadn't found your bat, she probably would have taken Dad's golf club." That's when it hit me. What happened to Lisa? "Well, she was caught red-handed breaking the windows of your family home." I thought Lisa was supposed to be on a work trip to the island. It seems she overheard a phone conversation between my father and me. About my pregnancy? Yeah. She must have figured out the timing of when she was brought to the island for work and lost her cool. We'll need to cool things down for a while. I felt relieved after hearing that. The next day after we were discharged from the hospital, my son, Alex, was as lively as ever, and he was now breastfeeding. I was gently stroking Alex's back when my smartphone rang. It was Michelle. I thought about ignoring it, but the call continued longer than I expected. However, after the 40th ring, I decided to answer, "Hello?" "Finally. Why did you take so long? How long did you plan to make me wait?" Another noise overlapped with her voice. "Stop that! Ugh, it's so loud!" "Hey, Lisa. Do you have a baby with you?" What I heard next was indeed the voice of a baby. "That's right. I took your son. But he's so noisy, crying nonstop." I was confused. Why would there be a baby there? "Ugh. I thought I'd take him home and raise him my way, but he's so loud." I quickly reached for the home phone. "Hello, is this Michael's mom?" "Why, what's up? Is Alex okay?" "Yes, but isn't that Alex crying?" Lisa was still making a racket in the background. It seems my mother-in-law heard the noise. Whispering, I asked, "Do you know where Lisa is right now?" "Huh? She's been quiet since the police handed her over. She just called, and it sounds like she has a baby with her." My mother-in-law gasped in shock. There were some noises. Probably her checking if Lisa's car was around. I put the home phone near my smartphone. "You checked the hospital to see if your son was there, didn't ya? Tough luck, he's right here with me." "Ugh, so darn loud. Oh, I got an idea." "Lisa, what have you been saying all this time?" With a pleased look as if she had come up with something, I asked her with a sinking feeling. "I'm gonna leave your baby out in the mountains." "But Alex is here with me, breastfeeding." "What?" The next moment, a scream echoed from the other end. "My Alex." I gently poked Alex's cheek. He let out a cheerful laugh. Lisa must have heard that. "Wait, then whose baby do I have here?" "What don't you get?" "Wasn't your son still in the hospital?" "My son and I have been discharged and are at home." There was a loud thud followed by the sound of a baby crying even louder and Lisa screaming. She must have realized she kidnapped someone else's baby. I grabbed the home phone. "Did you hear that? Something serious has happened." "Yes. I'm gonna call the hospital right now. You stay put." The call ended. What a reliable woman. Indeed, I was not in a position to move right now. Given the constant need for breastfeeding, I couldn't leave my son's side. For the time being, I decided to focus all my energy on soothing my son, who started crying due to the noise coming from the other side of the smartphone. Later, I was informed that Lisa's car was found parked by the seaside road. Lisa was found dazed inside the car. The baby placed in the car seat in the back was safely retrieved. He was mildly dehydrated and was sternly reprimanded by the paramedics. Needless to say, his parents were furious with Lisa. This wasn't just a family squabble like breaking a window. It was a kidnapping involving someone else's child. The parents of the kidnapped baby were mildly dehydrated and were furious, saying, "Our child was almost killed. We won't let this slide." They clearly showed an attitude of not forgiving Lisa tomorrow. My father-in-law, who rushed back in a hurry, reportedly told the police, "There's no handling this at home anymore. I thought I was keeping an eye on things to make sure Michelle and others weren't inconvenienced, but this is the last straw. I'm cutting ties with you for good." Lisa, the one being told this, seemed initially clueless about what he was talking about. Then, the moment she understood, she reportedly let out a loud scream. But why someone else's child? The police gave the answer to the in-laws. Firstly, Lisa had been quiet at the in-laws' house for a while. But it seems that was to plot revenge against me for being detained over the matter of breaking the glass at her family home. She learned about my upcoming discharge from overhearing a conversation between her parents and planned to kidnap my son before that. But Lisa missed the exact discharge date. My release from the hospital had been brought forward. Both my son and I were in good enough health to be discharged, and suddenly, there was a need for our bed. I gladly agreed to the early release. Lisa came to the hospital after I had already been discharged. She apparently sneaked into a patient room where another mother and child with the same last name as ours were staying and took the child when she sensed I wasn't there. Apparently, with her large build, wearing a sling carrying a baby, she just looked like any other patient being discharged. The bassinet was one of the items that my mother-in-law had hurriedly bought in preparation for my baby, including a crib and other things. She quickly sneaked into the house and, while looking for her car keys, spotted it and thought it was just perfect to take. The baby's mother, who happened to be in the bathroom, and the hospital were in an uproar. The situation became clear thanks to a call from my mother-in-law, and both the police and ambulances were dispatched. The police also came to our house, checked the call history on my smartphone, and said they were able to pinpoint Lisa's location. So, as a result, Lisa is gonna be in jail for a while. Deservedly so. She's gonna face a criminal trial, and lawyers keep coming, asking for testimonies that would be in her favor, but the in-laws firmly declined and said they won't support or help her in any way. My smartphone finally went silent. We sighed in relief, thinking that peaceful days are finally upon us. At this rate, the day when Michael will return to take over the family home and we all live happily together seems close.